Okay.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. We have another consumer search seminar. You have 50 minutes. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I mean, I'm very happy to present in a seminar that dedicated to consumer search. So feel free to ask me questions during the presentations. Your comments and suggestions are most welcome, especially everyone here is an expert in search. So today I'm going to present my paper with Johannes from Leung. It's about, so the title is Distractive and Comparisons. Basically, in a nutshell, the title gave it away already. It's about consumers with limited attentions and how firms use product designs and advertisements to distract them from comparisons and weaken price competitions. So to start with, let me talk about, let me mention something that is so obvious. Information is important for consumers. In real life, we see a lot of regulations or industry coming, getting bigger and bigger because of that, right? Nutrition table is one of example. Fees of financial products, of course, we have a lot of discussions about that, making it transparent, etc., etc. And review and recommendation side is a big industry that's gained a lot of profit, mainly because information is important for consumers. But then there are a lot of evidence that shows that people ignore readily available informations, which suggest limited attention. So there are, for example, studies that showing that although the cost of Medicare plan was available just through a simple click on the internet, but then still people still overpay a lot the plans, and that comes to questions. How do we make regulations that benefits consumers, that allows them to take advantages of the informations? So a lot of naive thinking would be that we just give more information to consumers, because information is useful. They're ignoring it, right? We give them enough such that they take notice, but then it's not that straightforward. There are evidence showing that exposure to advertisements arguably that gives informations, and sales force increase the price. So that, in some sense, says that information could actually weaken competitions. So this paper is, we're trying to look at whether giving more information in the setting of consumers with limited attention could actually strengthen or weaken competitions. So we're looking at a context of complex products in particular. So we're thinking about, in terms of complex product, so say I'm looking for an insurance plan. There are a lot of information that I could look for. Not only, I could look for insurance plan A and B, etc. But at the same time, I could also look at in more details insurance plan A, or just compare more superficially different plans, right? So that's the idea. In particular, we're looking at how design is going to influence what consumers pay attention to, whether they look at one thing in a more detailed way, or look at several things in a superficial way. Right, so this is the main questions of the paper, which is how do firms use design to refocus consumers' limited attention. So to answer these questions, we kind of combine two literature together. So the first one is the design, the literature in particular from pioneer from Johnson and Myers 2006 that talk about product designs. In particular, they talk about design that influence the dispersions of consumer match values. Right? So you think about more dispersion of consumer match value, which captures a more niche design, niche product design in terms of features that focus on niche consumers. It could be making taste-based features more salient, or sending more precise information about match values. So that's one of the building block of our paper. The other one is the idea of limited attentions. In particular, we look at a very specific form of limited attentions where consumers are they trade off between depth and breadth of search. So it's not like just search model where consumers search product one by one, but rather that they're thinking about whether to look for more information about one single product or a smaller subset of product, or to browse superficially for more product. Okay, and we think that this is in particular relevant to the case where products are complex. Okay, so before I talk about the models, let me give you a preview of the results. So one thing that's important in our model is that there is a distraction effect, right? The distraction effects speak to how firms distract consumers from price comparisons. So we found that consumers and firms would combine large prices with more precise information. By giving more precise information, consumers will have more incentive to actually look for more information about a single product, or focus on more on matched values instead of price comparisons. That would lead to less comparison shoppings. That would, in terms, weaken competitions. In particular, and also in the equilibrium, there would be a mixed strategy equilibrium where we have price variations that correlated with desired variations. So we will have firms that chooses high price, but also give more information or picking a more niche design, and firms that chooses low price that gives less information or choose a more mass market design. Right. So that's the main kind of theoretical contributions of this paper. For policy implications, we look at informational interventions. In particular, we look at we showed that more detailed information could relax competition, especially because of the distraction effects. That's giving more information to consumers could, for example, exposure to sales force. So sales can talk to consumers about more things about products. That could relax competitions and even harm consumers, right? Even though consumers get valuable information that help them to make better decisions, the weakening in competitions could backfire and harm consumers and hurt consumer surplus. We also show that to distract consumers, firm has to obfuscate information. In particular, I mean, this is go hand in hand into the distraction effects, right? Firms will have to give more information, but also information that could deplete consumers' attentions from price comparisons. So they have to obfuscate information. So the conclusions out of that would be that coarser or easily more available information could reinforce comparison shoppings and benefits consumers. And we're going to talk about some not regulation, but some developments in Europe, particularly this Nutri-Score, where they use a label ranking the nutrition of food by A, B, C, D, E instead of showing them just the complicated food labels. That gives less information to consumers, but we're going to show that in this setup, and it also, we're going to talk about some empirical literature that these courses and easily available information could reinforce comparison shopping. Okay, so Warren, are there any questions? No? Okay. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. So this is the related literature. I'm just going to go through it very quickly. So it relates to 4 strands of literature. The first, of course, consumer search, given we are in a consumer search seminar. Definitely, this paper will look at how design impacts what consumers pay attention to. So not only how they search for one product and the other, but also what type of information they search about. We would, of course, this paper is related to the product design literature because we use the model of product design. But here design influence consumers' attentions. We also related to the obfuscation literature, but here consumers' attention is endogenous. So consumers get to search more or less information about different product. And lastly, we also related to the information overload literature. But here, so here, individual firms deliberate overload consumers so that to redirect their consumer attention to informations about product characteristic instead of price. Okay, so here is today's roadmap. I'm going to talk about a very simple model. Hopefully, I will be clear. And then, so I will talk about the setup, and then talk about the equilibrium, and then I will talk about what the distraction effect means, and what the surplus analysis is. In particular, I'm going to look at how giving more information could actually backfire and hurt consumers' welfare. And then at the end, I will talk about what extensions we have done. Okay, if there's no questions, then I would talk about the model. Okay, so this is some simple graph that I draw. So hopefully it would be helpful to help you understand. So we have two firms here, firm K equal to 1 and K to 2. They're competing for a mass one of consumers with unit demand. There are two types of consumers. One we go bargain shoppers, and one we go value shoppers. So bargain shoppers has mass 1 minus alpha. Alpha is equal to is between 0 and 1. And bargain shoppers basically are those who look for bargains. So they don't care about the product characteristic. In particular, they value the two products the same way, right? So VIK for I stand for the consumers. It is going to be equal to V for both K equal to 1 or 2, right? So the two products are homogeneous to them, and they just look for bargains. They just buy the cheaper product. Value shoppers, on the other hand, is kind of the main character of this model. So it has mass alphas between 0 and 1, and it has so in this simple model, the match value is binary. It follows the binary distributions, and it's draw IID from either V plus SK or V minus SKs with one half probability. So with 1/2 probability, it is going to be a good match. So V plus SK is the match value. With 1/2 probability, is a bad match. So V minus SK is the match value. And this SK is going to be the design parameters of the firms that I will talk about later. Okay, so this comes the first building block, which is the limited attention of consumers. So I was talking about what we want to capture is that consumer trade-off between learning more about a smaller set of products or learning less about a larger set of products.
Benson, can I just, hello.
Yes.
Simon.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, I can't see the pictures anymore. But, may I just slow you? Yeah, thank you. I slow you down on that just to give me a chance.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering about the following. You said at the beginning you've got a mixed strategy equilibrium.
Right.
And I'm sort of usually going to wonder to what extent is this driving some of your results, and sometimes leery of the comparative static properties of them. So that's coming because you haven't shown it to me, but at least I'm saying that's on my radar screen. And I'm sort of wondering about a couple of things here. It looks like there's at least two reasons why you may be getting them. And I'm sort of wondering why, what would happen if you smoothed out those? So the first one I'm seeing is you've got these bargain shoppers, which is sounding like Varian's model of sales, which we know as a mixed strategy. So you've got that in. And then the other one is the thing you've got on this slide you've just shown me, that you've got this binary match distribution, so 2-point thing. And so I was wondering whether I saw that, when I saw that, whether things smooth out if you have a continuous distribution. This is maybe for much later, but I'm just, you can duck this and it's maybe not relevant, but I'm just sort of alerting you to where the flags are going up in my mind about what's coming.
I see. No, that's definitely spot on. So the bargain shoppers is that definitely drives the mixed strategy equilibrium. If we do not have bargain shoppers, so to be honest, if we do not have bargain shoppers, then I don't even know what the price equilibrium would be. If you, if you have worked on, so I try to work on myself, duopoly models and with horizontal differential product. If we do not have the lock-on-cave assumptions, for instance, here we had a discrete distributions. The price distribution is, I don't know how to solve it, so I have no answer to that.
Just curious. This is a very horrible question, taking you around in loops. I apologize, but now I've got you on that. Just to benchmark it, what would happen if, as you said, you took out the bargain shoppers and you had in the just a usual, I don't know, a type 1 extreme value or something, a normal distribution of match values? Is that just a standard discrete choice model?
Let me think about it.
Don't let me, sorry, having said that, don't
I would
stop and think about it too much, but I'm just saying what flags are. I'll let you get on with what's going on and see what I can figure out, but it may be useful sometimes to draw some benchmarks which may be useful. Please go ahead.
Dan. I did have a question though.
Yes, please.
So more of a clarifying, but very related to what Simon was asking. Right now, you've got a value V if they're bargain shoppers, and then a value that's either equally above or equally below V. Right. Is that really? I couldn't really think through this fully, but it didn't feel like the most reasonable. Should we think of them as having the same average? And then once you take into account the actual search behavior, you would actually expect that they could have a value above that. If you said all search cost to 0 and they had like 10 options in front of them, they're probably going to find one with the positive realization and they'll take it. It strikes me as a bit odd to use the same average, or at least to make it as an assumption for everything. We try. So before we tried, in the first model, we have the bargain shoppers having a V that is large enough, so they buy for sure one of the firms, and that doesn't change much the things. And the other way, I think the other way of interpreting it is that bargain shoppers and value shopper, they are basically the same consumers, and bargain shoppers are those who don't have the knowledge to understand the information, for example, right? So they cannot. So there's no way that they could find out the match value in some sense. So I that would be another interpretation. And if you're framing it that way, I would almost then have framed it going value shoppers to bargain shoppers, where they're not really bargain shoppers, they're non-observant shoppers, or I feel like that's a different thing than bargain shoppers in my mind.
No, that's fair enough. But then they, in the model they look the same. But I understand. Right. So the quick answer to Simon's questions about the continuous distributions, we have actually done the extension, and it doesn't really. So we still have mixed strategy equilibrium, and the result goes through. Thanks a lot for the question. So this is again, this is the limited tension, the depth and breadth that we're trying to model. In this model with like two firms, it boils down to something very almost trivial, is that consumers are trading off between learning price and match value of one product, or learning prices of both products. Especially because we assume that consumer has to learn the price before they buy. Okay? So to model these limited tensions, we're going to look at a very simple search model. It's as simple as my drawing is. So we have a guy here, consumer I, a value shoppers. So the search models goes to the following. So first, he's matched with one of the two firms. So say firm equal to 2. Then he observed the product design as 2 and observed the price, right? So that piece of information is free. And then he thinks about whether I want to learn more about this product 2, or I should go out and find the other product, right? If I learn more about the product 2, I learned VI2, right? The match values of that product 2. If I go out and search for the other product, I learn P1, right? So this is the breadth, this is the depth. Okay, so afterwards, if he learns only the VI2, then he's decide whether to buy that firm, buy product 2, because he doesn't know what product 1 is, what the price is. If he learns about the price of product 1, then he decide, whether he buy from one firm or the other, or no firm at all. Okay, so that's consumers' limited attention. Okay, right. So on the other hand, we have the other building block, which is firms' decisions. So before consumers do the simple search thing, two firms, they choose price PK and match value designed SK, which we assume belongs to these segments, 0 to S bar, and they choose it simultaneously. So high SK will refer to a niche design, and low SK refer to a mass market design. Right, so this is, I'm sorry. So the low SK corresponds to the mass market design, which is the following, and then if you increase the SK, the match value goes more extremes, and therefore it's there are more dispersions, and when we say that is a niche design. Okay. So as I said before, we use that from Johnson & Meyer 2006, and it stands for more precise information, product design, or making more taste-based features more salient than quality. Okay, so this is a timeline. First, firms choose S and P, which in particular SK and PK, and then consumers randomly assigned to one of the firms and observe the design and the price of that firm. After that, they decide whether to study VIK, right? So this is the depth options. We call it studying. After studying VIK, then he could decide whether to buy product K or to get the outside options, which we assumed has value 0. Or he could go for the breadth options, in which he will browse price P minus K. In that case, he would decide whether to buy from product K, product minus K, or to get the outside options. Again, outside options has value 0.
To clarify then, so they can't search deeper and then search the other price and then search the other value. Mechanically, if they search deeper, they can't search wider in this model.
Yes. So we actually look. Yeah, of course, that's that's not realistic at all. I mean, in real life, we want to allow them to search more. So we actually look at as extensions where the outside options is actually the continuations payoff of searching. In particular, we look at a model with infinite firms, and then here. Consumer will randomly match to one firms, and then he would decide whether to search, right? So think about a consideration set where the consumers know all the prices, and then he would decide whether to study one of the firms in the consideration set or take one more firm in the consideration set by learning its price, right? So, and then the outside options could be just taken as the continuation value. And
yeah, because that would be different. My worry here is the mechanical kind of two different ways of ending and no way of continuing in this picture.
Yeah. That's fair enough. And then in the extensions,
another quick one, Benson. Just for again, this one is for future if you hadn't thought about it. But normally one might think of product design as being a more sort of once and for all type of decision, more sticky than pricing. And so the natural question there would be, what if we chose the S's first and then the sub-game we chose the prices?
Yeah.
If you haven't thought about it, don't worry about it here. I just put that out for you to think about.
Yes.
I'm no idea whether there's a nice solution or whether it's a messy one. I'll let you go ahead.
So we have the first model we have is actually we make firms to choose S first and then P later. But then I forgot the solutions. We have similar result, I remember, but I'm not quite sure. But we have thought about it. But thank you for pointing it out. All right. So so the equilibrium that we look at is symmetric perfect Bayesian equilibrium. In particular, consumers are going to form beliefs about firms' prices when they decide whether to search for prices. They have to have that belief, and the belief has to be correct in equilibrium. We make equilibrium selection assumptions, which says that when bargain shoppers are indifferent between browsing prices and studying match values, some arbitrarily small share is going to browse price. So that rules out the diamond paradox kind of equilibrium where firms choose to pick the monopoly prices and bargain shoppers, because they're indifferent, they don't search for prices. Okay, so that rules that out. And then we're going to show that we're going to focus today on the case where S satisfy these inequalities. I mean, I know that it's not understandable at all now, but just I will talk about what it means and later. Okay, cool. So any questions about the setup so far? No? Okay. All right. So so to start with, we're going to look at what consumers' trade-off is when they decide whether to search for more information about one product or more superficially about two products. So suppose that consumers assigned to firm 1, he observed P1 and S1, and then he takes let's say distributions P GP2 of firm 2. So what happens here is that there are this trade-off. By studying, the consumers could avoid buying a mismatched product, especially when V minus S1 is actually smaller than P1, right? In this case, if you buy the products, you find out it's a bad match, he has negative utility. Or to browse for the other price. In this case, he benefits from searching for the other price if the price is smaller, right? So that he benefits when P2 is smaller than P1. Right. So how do value shoppers use attentions? So first of all, one features of that would be if SK is bigger than V, so S1 is bigger than V should be, then the value shopper would choose to browse if and only if P1 is sufficiently large. Okay, so this is the reason of that is that when P1 is larger, there are more likelihood, there is more likely for the consumers to actually find a cheaper product, right? So he has more incentive to search for the other price, the price of another product. Okay, so that means there will exist some P1 upper bar, right? In particular, such that firms would always charge P1 smaller than P1 upper bar, right? Because if P1 is bigger than P1 upper bar, consumer would decide to browse, and there's no way that the firm could sell to consumers, right? Because consumers would then buy from the other firm for sure. Okay. On the other hand, which is one thing that's important for the results is that larger SK encourage studying, right? You can see here the loss of buying a mismatch increases with S1 or SK. While on the other hand, the benefits of browsing doesn't really depend on S. So therefore, here when you increase S1 and encourage consumers to study, because there are more informations, there are more values of the informations of the match values. So that's going to be crucial when we talk about the distraction effects. Okay, so in particular, it also means that P1 bar would increases in SK. Right, so that's something that we want to think about. We want to keep in mind. Okay. Lastly, we will have if GP1 is bigger than 0, meaning that there is some probability that you could find a cheaper product. And GV bigger than 0 means that there is some probability that the values, the price, right? There's some probability the price is actually smaller than V, right? So there are some values of searching for a cheaper product because could be a cheaper product, and the cheaper product is actually smaller than the average. The price is smaller than the average match value, right? Then the consumers will buy that cheaper product. So in that case, consumer will browse if SK is sufficiently small. In the sense that if SK is small, then this benefit of studying is more, and therefore consumers it's better off browsing. Right? In particular, when S1 is 0, there's no dispersion at all, and it is trivially holds. Right? So SK would small SK encourage browsing, and large SK encourages study. Right? So that's consumer trade-off. Right? So that's going to be useful when we talk about the equilibrium. Any questions? No. Right. So let's talk about the equilibrium. Again, right. This is understandable. So I'll skip this and look at the graph directly. I hope that's okay. You could go back to the more math if you want. Right. So in the equilibrium, there is this mixed strategy equilibrium, as I talked about. So this is the price support of the price in equilibrium. So basically, there will be a lot of small prices. In particular, the distribution here will be atomless, no gaps, etc., continuous. And there is this one high prices, which is mass point bigger than V. And at these high prices, at this mass point, firms would choose the biggest dispersions S bar. Value shoppers would study, and bargain shopper would browse. Okay, so here firms would choose high dispersions and high prices, and they would choose high dispersion to incentivize consumers or value shoppers to study. And bargain shoppers, because there's no values of studying, so they browse. At these low prices, firms would choose small enough S, as long as S is smaller than some threshold, it doesn't matter. In this case, value shopper will browse, so they do not study, they try to find lower price, and bargain shoppers will browse as well. Okay, and P bar is the highest price in which firm could still distract value consumers from price comparisons. Okay, right. So if firms charge a price here, there's no way value shopper is going to study, and therefore firms cannot gain any profit there. So this is the equilibrium. Okay, so let me go through the kind of intuitions of the equilibrium. So first, there only could be one mass point for P bigger than V, because here firms only sell to studying value shoppers, because browsing here means that the consumers will not buy for sure from the firms, right? Because if the consumer browse, the expected value of getting that product is just V, right? So if price is bigger than V, there's no way for getting there's no way to sell to these consumers, right? So the demand is always studying consumers, and only if they find out the match is actually good. So the demand is also always 1/2, and therefore there could be only one mass point. There is no gaps or mass point for P smaller than V, that's just because the variant type of arguments. Otherwise, firms could increase price or undercut price with either choosing S equal to 0 or S equal to upper bar. And that's next. It's going to be, we're going to use the parameter assumptions of the S bar that we have. Remember, we have these crazy S bar conditions. So here we show, so we have this equilibrium because we assume that S bar is big enough such that there is a mass point at P bars bigger than V, and S bar is, on the other hand, S bar is small enough, so S bar has to be in this intermediate range. S bar is small enough that there are mass in this range. Otherwise, we're just gonna have one monopoly price if S bar is too big. Okay, so this is the equilibrium. Right. So another the distractions. Right. So the other intuitions that proves the firm strategies is exactly the distraction effect. So firms combine large prices with much dispersions. That's because, sorry about that. So that's because firms that charge high price, they have incentive to distract consumers from price comparisons. That's where they could gain their profits. So therefore, in equilibrium, firms with high price are going to choose S bar big enough, to distract price comparisons. On the other hand, for small prices, firm is going to be encouraging browsing for low prices because value shopper would be unlikely to find cheaper product in this range, right? Because let's say the price is here, there's only this probability that price is cheaper. So firms has incentive to encourage browsing. And also when value shopper browse, they will ignore mismatch. I mean, they do not have any information. So they would that would raise demand. Okay, I see there's a raised hand.
Can I ask? Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm just a little bit confused. Why do you call it distraction effect? Because it seems that distraction, this fact that P bar and S bar go together, is exactly they encourage shoppers to study, right?
Yeah.
So that they encourage more studying rather than more browsing. So that's they make exactly people focus rather than distract them. Or so I'm just wondering why you kind of use that word.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a good point. That doesn't come into our mind. So when we think about distraction, we think about distraction from price comparison.
Okay, I see. Fair enough. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's why we call distraction. I think that distractions kind of have a negative feeling to it, and when we talk about consumer surplus, we're going to show that this distraction effects harm consumer surplus. So the negative,
I see.
feeling of that would fit.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, no problem. Thanks a lot for the question. So one thing that I would like to talk about is that these pricing patterns resemble the regular prices and sales that the empirical literature documents, right? So the fixed price is often pretty stable, but there are a lot of variations when there's price discount. It also fits into the findings where firms advertising price reductions in order to encourage browsing, right? So this is the equilibrium. Are there any questions? Sorry for flipping the slide. Okay. So
can I ask one?
Yes, please.
I'm trying to remember. In general, even if you didn't have search, would you be finding that more dispersion here would mean higher prices?
What more dispersions? Yeah, so it depends.
So, like in general, is this are you really just finding more dispersed values allows a firm to price higher?
No. So there are two things. So one thing is that it very much depends on the distribution itself. So it's unclear in general what more dispersion would increase price. But one thing that is more kind of let's say more clear is that when we have when we don't have limited attentions, I'm going to talk about that. When we don't have when we don't have limited attentions, when you increase dispersion, that could increase price, but that's because the value of consumers is getting higher. So firms could extract the higher values from consumers. But then that is unlikely to bring down consumer surplus because the extractions of values is going to cap by the increase in value. But here in limited attentions, in this example, in this setting, we show that with limited attentions, more dispersions doesn't only increase price, but it increase price to a great extent that would decrease consumer surplus. Yeah. Okay, so this is just one small thing that I think I find it cute and useful for surplus analysis is that in equilibrium, value shoppers equilibrium surplus is equal to that of bargain shoppers. So there's no two kind of different surplus for different consumers. That's because firms would choose S bar such that value shoppers is just indifferent between browsing and studying. Right, so their values, the surplus is going to be equal to the expected surplus of always browsing.
Is that coming through from the fact that you you allow them to choose, but they can't be both in some sense? Right, they're getting like, because they get to choose whether to search the other price or to search the value of the product that they've seen.
Yeah.
So because they're making the choice and you're restricting to this equilibrium where they do both, they have to be equal, just to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah. That's correct.
Also, you have 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's good. I think I have enough time. So now we're going to talk about the comparative statics and surplus analysis with respect to the change in S bar. So we think about a larger S bar that can capture more niche design that just comes from deregulations or innovation, or more precise product information that could come from new advertising technologies, disclosure requirements, and et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to look at what S bar is going to affect consumer surplus. This, I'm just basically so here I would just basically talk about the installations of the result that I just used to answer Dennis' questions. So let's think about what an S bar does to equilibrium. So first, an S bar, so let's say we have an equilibrium here. This is one equilibrium prices, the distribution of equilibrium prices. And now think about a sudden change in S bar and what happens. So first, a larger S bar would raise prices in the first order stochastic dominant sense. So it would changes the price from this black line to this green line. And that's coming from just the profit equal profits conditions in the equilibrium, right? Because so S bar would increase this P bar, right? Because now because the firms could charge a higher S bar, they could actually has a higher ability to distract consumers from price comparisons, right? Consumer will have more incentive to study, and therefore they could charge a higher price while still incentivizing studying. And the rest of the distributions just increases because of the equal profits condition.
So in this world where there's an unexpected difference, so like you're thinking of a world where like something just changes S bar and you're just looking at the pricing response would be? Yeah. And they still want to mix even in this kind of unexpected
no. So I'm right.
Oh.
So yeah, no. I'm talking about I'm talking about a larger S bar, but I'm trying to decompose the effect of changing from one equilibrium to another. Right. So here I'm just thinking about the first type of effects where the price increases because firm can charge higher price while still incentivize people to study. Yeah, but thank you for the questions. I should be more clear. All right. So so that would reinforce the distraction effects because firms can distract consumers from more effectively from browsing. That would raise price, right? So that's just what I talked about. But then in turns, right? So I should talk about. Well, I should actually have more points here. So first, I was talking about the increase in price because of an increase in S bar. Next, because my opponent has increased the price, right? So consumers will have less incentive to search for prices because he knows that in average, the prices in equilibrium or in the market has increased. So that's give me extra ability to increase my price and distract consumers from browsing. So that's the effect that would harm, that drives us to decrease in consumer surplus. And that's exactly what's absent in a world with without limited tensions. Okay, so more precise information here reduce competitions. In particular, we have a proposition saying that firms' profits will increase in the S bar and consumer surplus will decrease in S bar. Okay. Right. So yeah. So here I'm just going to talk about a world without limited tensions and just compare the result. So if we consider again an increase in S bar, if we fix prices and if we fixed search strategies, studying consumers will get better match, and therefore that will raise consumers' surplus. Right. So that's the case where attention is not endogenous. Right. So in particular, with full attentions, more information do not harm consumers because the price increase is going to be limited by the value increase. But in this case, in the limited attention case, consumer browse less, and therefore that is going to be that brings firms to actually a better ability to charge higher price that will lead to higher, larger price in equilibrium and lowers consumer surplus. Right. So in particular, one policy implication is that coarser information could benefit consumers. Right. So I have a few minutes. So let's talk about another thing that we look at as obfuscated information. Right. So we were talking about giving more information actually harm consumers. So that brings questions as to why people would not like to believe that in general. But one thing that we want to talk about is that it's not only more information, but the fact that sellers would also want this information to deplete consumers' attentions. Right. So in particular, we look at extensions where firms would also have decisions to decide whether to obfuscate information, which consumers would have the limited attention that we talked about, or firms could make information easily available. In that case, consumers will learn the match values, and he still have incentive, he still have attentions to look for prices. And of course, firms would not want to do that, right? Otherwise, if consumer look for other prices, that decrease profits. So we show that when firms exploit this distraction effects in equilibrium, they also want to obfuscate information. So they would choose not to give away information cheaply, and consumers therefore have to do either studying or browsing. Okay, so right, so the result, the policy implication is that to exploit distraction effects, firms will offer detailed and obfuscated product informations. Right, so this is the more formal math, but let me skip it. So let's talk about the implication of the paper, right? So first, as I said, firms' equilibrium profit is higher when they can send more detailed but obfuscated information, and consumer surplus will be lower in that case. That's when we find it very fitting to the case of Nutri-Score, which is implemented in a lot of places in Europe. So Nutri-Score is this idea where we rank the nutrition of food instead of just presenting a complicated table, right? So this fit exactly the idea of coarser and easily available informations. And there are evidence showing that firms lobby against Nutri-Score by proposing some more detailed information disclosure mandate, right? So firms in an industry, they do want to give more detailed information, as you can see here. So they don't like more coarser informations. But interestingly, some of them adopt the more coarser informations disclosure method, this Nutri-Score, even though it is voluntary. So that confirms our mixed strategy equilibrium, right? Although firms in equilibrium, the equilibrium decreases when they have more coarser information, but then some of them will still send coarser information because they want to encourage comparison browsing. So that's something that our model could speak to. So
just so you know, you have about 30 seconds to conclude.
Yes, we have. I have. I will conclude very soon. So so there are other evidence. So Nutri-Score attract attention from nutrition labels. So it's it's relevant, and in particular, Nutri-Score label decrease profits. So it strengthened competition. So coarser information actually strengthen competitions and encouraging browsing. And a result also talks about banning ads will promote competitions and consumer welfare. And then we talk about a couple of extensions, larger parameter range, moving beyond 2 firms, as I talked about, and also the continuous matched value distribution. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a great presentation. We now open it up to questions.
Just a comment rather than a question, Benson. Maybe something you might find useful for the motivation about why the consumers can choose one. Just to look at one aspect. I'm just remembering the paper, maybe faultily remembering, but Dinah Maislin has this nice paper about quality signaling. And I think what drives it, so she's probably got a very nice motivation about why that should be a reasonable thing to assume. So you might want to look at the stories she tells about why consumers look at one or the other. I mean, I guess they do it in your model regardless of their expected benefits from each characteristic. So it's a constraint, it's one thing or the other one.
Yeah.
So I think she does something like that as well, and very successfully, and some very nice takeaways for, quality signaling through advertising. So
I see.
Look to her for a nice background stories. That might be helpful, maybe not. So I leave that one for you to check up afterwards, and I pass to someone else.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That is very helpful.
I have just one comment on maybe the interpretation of S that you kind of in the based on the literature, you kind of interpret this as niche products versus these mainstream ones. But in some sense here, it really just works as if the firms make it very costly for you to make a mistake when you have this S very high, right? So it's really it just has a little bit of a different feeling in my opinion, in the context of people not finding it out before purchasing sometimes.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? Just because sometimes I buy something without actually knowing whether it's a niche or a mainstream product in some sense, because I don't know the actual S. Well, S I know actually. S I find out, right? But I don't know if it is. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, so the way that I present it, maybe it's a bit misleading because I'll talk about avoiding mismatch, but actually, I mean, the firms has to, on the other hand, the firms also has to offer a at higher values when it's a good match, right? The firms cannot just decrease the utility of a bad match. That wouldn't actually, I mean, that would hurt the firms because the expected value, I mean, it just keep decreasing. So it's not only about avoiding mismatch in some sense. Yeah. So it's also about giving a better match product with probability 1/2. But yeah, and the talk
yes,
I talk a lot about.
But you see, like somehow you know, as in usually you can always avoid like very bad match values, let's say, in search by just saying, okay, this is not good enough, I'm not going to buy. But here you can't do it sometimes. If you choose to browse, this option isn't available to you, right? So so in that sense, you kind of force that the fact that you have this mean preserving spread now actually can hurt consumers. In usual consumer search, it always benefits consumers precisely because the lower end you kind of cut off endogenously.
Right. I see what you mean. So that's right. So here we take away consumers' ability to actually avoid the mismatch in some sense.
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah.
We think. Yeah, thanks. We just think about it. How to put it in the paper.
Sure.
That went back to what I was thinking earlier, by the way. The kind of forced terminal ends to search mean that you're going to get incredibly different effects than if it's open-ended. Now, that doesn't mean you can't find the same answers there, but the kind of what drives what part of the model, at least in my mind, will be different. Related to what they can and can't do, is the consumer able to buy the product without searching deeper?
You mean without searching the match value?
Yeah.
They could. So we assume that they could buy the product once they know the price.
Okay. So do they sometimes?
In the case where with these low prices, they would just browse prices and without studying. So they sometimes would get bad matches.
Put differently, I'm trying to remember, do you have any search cost for browsing versus?
No, we don't have any search
cost. If there was an arbitrarily small search cost here, your problem's going to become significantly different, because I actually, assuming the spread is not so bad and the price is not so bad, if you were to look at the value of this product, which gives you now whether it's good or bad, if you're going to buy it in both scenarios, you would never incur a search cost here, because you would just accept the averages,
So there's you mean
so you've got some odd things baked into this simpler example, is what I'm saying. And I think that concerns me, even if the results sound plausible. The model you presented seems implausible. And I think that's challenging me, at least. So to put it differently, if I know I'm going to pay a search cost and I can either buy this product or select the outside option, and the value setup is such that I'll buy this product in either scenario, I would never want to incur the cost to learn the value, because I don't care, I'm going to buy it regardless.
Yeah, so that depends on the dispersion, right? When the dispersion is high enough, so incurring this, if the dispersion is high enough such that buying the product with a bad match yields negative utility, then with very small search cost, I would still incur the search costs and study.
And then we return back to the earlier comment, which is dispersion is about punishment of incorrectly selecting the bad one. Do you see because of how you've set it up, really dispersion matters for the issue of selecting something that's bad rather than for the issue of finding something that's good.
Avoiding something that's bad.
I don't think these things are insurmountable, but these are the challenges that I'm having with this model.
I mean, we have as I said, we have a model with outside options equal searching more. I mean, in that case, the way we set up the models, we have a stationary equilibrium where you either search, you either study a product or browse a product, and if you don't buy, you never come back. So, so that's you could say that the features, I mean the result of that is kind of impossible as well, but it gives us a good theoretical handle to it.
I think my worry, though, is you're still relying on the cost of moving forward as being purely on the exclusivity of the choice. Right? Like, assuming I'm understanding it, most of the time, what's really bounding you is the fact that you're throwing other things away. Not saying there aren't scenarios where this is totally plausible, but it does eliminate a lot of the ones I think of. Like if I'm in a food aisle, me looking at one label is not going to mean I can't look at the next price or the next label. And so it does cause problems with some of these arguments.
I don't know if it answers questions, but in the in the stationary model that we look at, we assume discount factor, so there's some kind of times cost there. And
I think this would get around these. These are more concerns for the current model, not necessarily. I think you could find similar effects in a different model.
So anyway.
I was just going to say, I'm going to stop the recording here just because now we're transitioning into more of a discussion.